Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New Heroes Darkness Within unit impressions and skills analysis. Of course, if you're new to the series, what we do here is we look at the new units, what roles I feel they may fulfill in the current top level Fire Emblem Heroes metagame. So that's through tier 21 plus AR up to tier 27 and Arena to a lesser extent, although Arena's not so difficult. So yeah, mostly AR analysis and where those units lie. We take a look at the skills as well and consider where they could best be used. This banner is cool. That's my first opinion to give you. Opinions meaning like they're just like flavor. I like this banner for a lot of reasons, but they're not going to be a banner that I'm going to pull for because this is pretty much what you would consider maybe waifu bait. I know the Fallen Heroes is a really popular type of banner, but I'm going to be as objective as I always am to let you guys know exactly why this banner might be for you or might not be for you. Hint, it's probably not for you. So let's get into it. Ooh, fancy.
Do you have a death wish?
All right. So I actually don't know who this character is because I never played her game. So that makes it easy for me to say what I think about her without any sort of bias. Red Sword Infantry, unfortunately, probably the most saturated pool in the whole game means that she's competing extremely hard with a lot of units. And that already by itself is probably not going to make her fulfill any role in specific. That's unfortunate for Mareeta. However, we will look at the skills before I give it my final judgment. There is also stats to consider, and that could swing the difference of whether she's useful or not. But Red Sword Infantry is super bloated with every single possible role you can imagine. Okay, so she comes with null follow-up, Luna. Those are already in the game. Null follow-up's always appreciated. She has 4 skills, so she's going to get demoted. Psych! No, she's not. You believe me for a second, didn't you? Okay, no, seriously, there's no demotes here. Don't even think for a second that there's going to be any demotes in this whole banner. Net with a preference weapon and a Flashing Blade 4 skill. And the rest of these units on these banner, definitely not. So anyways, Flashing Blade 4, let's talk about this before I talk about Mareeta's implications further. This skill has to be like the biggest bait I've ever seen in the history of this game for a new skill being released, and the additional effect could be detrimental more times than it is positive. It actually can be. There are situations where you want Flashing Blade 3 over Flashing Blade 4 because you have to critically think about where you're going to use this skill. When you use blade skills, whether heavy or Flashing Blade in the A slot, they prefer to be on units who are performing the Gale Force role, infantry specifically. You wouldn't really use it on armors because of Bolt Fighter. So pretty much you use it in combination with Gale Force units in the A slot. Now, a Gale Force unit needs to generally double because they have a 4 charge with a slaying weapon. And if they end up killing in one hit, then they have successfully failed at Gale Forcing. Therefore, the extra 5 damage can be detrimental, and in some cases you just literally want Flashing Blade 3 over 4, which is ridiculous. So that skill has to be the biggest bait in the world. However, there are cases where that is good, and that's going to be on lower attack units who generally won't even kill in 2 hits. So I'm talking like Gale Force Dancers, such as Sylvia, Olivia, Azura, whatever, or really low attack units like Anna or Selena. I don't know why you would use those. Anna's okay, but I don't know why you would use Selena per se as a Gale Force unit, but that's where it's probably best used on. Otherwise, you actually may consider just using Flashing Blade 3 over 4. That's not a troll. This skill seems to be a pretty big bait, and people think that the extra damage is somehow like broken because it's like Death Blow, I guess. Death Blow 3 on the A slot plus Flashing Blade, so you get cooldown acceleration and stuff. Sure, unlike a PvE map where you're going to be accelerating your specials all the time and getting that extra damage and just clearing things with like Special Spiral or something, sure, like it has that usage. But in AR, you put this on a Gale Force unit in the A slot and you Gale Force sweep. Killing things in one hit, very bad. That's why it's not the ideal A skill. So summoning for this is not really the idea here. Anyways, let's talk about Mareeta herself. So Shadow Sword is very, very interesting and potentially really good depending on her stat spread. So it's a slaying weapon, has that cooldown reduction, bringing Gale Force specifically down to 4. And on top of that, she has the Forcetti Spaghetti effect from Lewin, which is amazing because if you have a 4-charge Gale Force and you rely on Flashing Blade, for instance, to special accelerate, and you don't get hit on retaliations, this could be potentially really good so that you don't die. That's amazing, especially on a Gale Force follow-up where you're just attacking things for free and not worrying about dying. Imagine like a high attack, low defense blue unit who could potentially kill her, but she Gale Forces off of it. That's really good. So I think that makes her stand out as a Gale Force unit. I don't necessarily think that makes her better than some of the other potential good Gale Force units though. Like Navarre is still likely to be way better and more consistent than Mareeta, unfortunately. However, as a one-off and a Gale Force unit, she probably has some potential, and I think she'll do fine if her stat spread ends up being like 40 speed and like 32 attack or something. Like a Mia stat spread would do a lot of work here.
Let go.
If you wish to be burned by Duma's flame, then by all means, touch me once more.
Oh man. Okay. So yeah, this is definitely my favorite unit of the banner and looks amazing. I'll give you that much. But just like I mentioned with Red Sword infantry units, Blue Lance Cavs are not in a good place either. Again, with Blue Lance Cavs, Blue Lance Flyers, Red Sword infantry, you got some really saturated pools. So Berkut is going to be competing pretty hard. If we look at his stat spread non-corrupted, it's probably going to be similar. That would be my educated guess on that. So the thing is, his stat spread is actually pretty unique, the old version of Berkut. So if he ends up having the same thing, it could work out in his favor to just be like a better version of his other self. That could work. However, again, Blue Lance Cav, 5-star locked. Let's see. So he comes with Odd Res Wave, Reprisal, skills we've seen before, whatever. Warding stats. I'm not really going to say much about this. It's literally just Steady Stance 4, but warding version. So people that have distant counter weapons are going to prefer this, just like Steady Stance 4 was. However, I think Warding Stance 4 could be slightly better than Steady Stance 4 when you consider that AR tends to have more magical nukes than physical nukes. Therefore, Warding Stance 4 is actually preferred over Steady Stance 4 if you were to make a choice between them. However, there are just literally better skills in the A slot anyways, including stuff like Breath, Bonus Doubler, for Defense Res. Sure, I'm missing stuff. There's definitely better skills than just using the stand skills, because denying special acceleration doesn't really have a good purpose right now in AR defense, because if you're being nuked by something, it tends to have its special already charged, so slowing it doesn't do much, and that just might as well be res plus 8 in the A slot in those cases. Anyways, the interesting part to talk about here is his weapon. And again, I'm going to mention this with the weapon because people look at this and think it's like really amazing because it has an additional effect on his distant counter kind of way. But the thing is, it's not very practical in the current game. To summarize it, it's basically distant counter, and it denies the enemy from making follow-up and then hurts an ally nearby. That's pretty good. Like on paper, it looks really good. But the thing is, it's not practical because to use it properly, especially on AR offense, would require Berkut to be the initiator. Like you literally need to bait with Berkut. So the optimal way to use this weapon is to like use him as a tank, use him as a mega tank, and then you don't let them follow up on you. So that's pretty good if he has a low speed stat and high defense res and high attack. Like I said, if this Berkut is like just a better version of other Berkut, then this weapon's gonna be pretty good. And it's highly dependent on the teammates you can bring in with him. So I wanna say this right away. Berkut is probably the biggest loser of this banner because he's a Blue Lance Cav and his weapon doesn't really do much right now, because it requires setup and requires him to be a tank. So without knowing his stats, and with the fact that Cavs are not really the ideal stat spreads for tanking, like if you're going to go for tanks, you're going to want like infantry because they don't have weaknesses, they have more stats. So, and they just have like better options generally, like infantry pulse and whatnot. The other thing with calves is you're going to run into some weaknesses that they have, which is trees, water, mountains, trenches. Okay, those are one thing. Mobility problems do happen. They're annoying. And secondly, there are effective weapons against them. They're a little bit rarer than I would say like dragons or armor slaying, because people don't really tank with calves. So Mkhaya, though, regular Mkhaya and dancing Mkhaya are still prominent. He is blue, and if the Astro Mythic does end up being a cavalry unit, he does have potential to be one of the best units in the game for tanking. I will say that outright. So this guy can end up being literally the worst unit on this banner, or potentially the best unit on this banner, depending on what the Astro Mythic gets released, or even any Mythic that gets released that ends up being a cav. Because then you can stack ward calves on him, along with Caden, who happens to be a cav and super stat stack anyways. So yeah, you can literally do it that way. Units can't follow up on him unless they use no follow-up. And yeah, that's amazing. Like, he could go from total junk, useless unit to the best, depending on what units get released or what skills get released and how you can potentially stat stack them, or what maps end up being more meta defining. Every other mode, though, he'd probably be amazing. And some of the setups you can definitely do with like Desperation, Vantage, Brazens and such, set up other units, Wings of Mercies, escape routes. There's endless possibilities if you can make it work. And that's the big problem. The conditional statement of making it work is what sets this guy apart from being amazing and not. And to make him work, you have to tank. Otherwise, there's no way to start initiating, having them initiate on you and making it work. So I'm going to hold my breath on this. Well, okay, so if he's using Duma's power, maybe he's gonna suck.
That blood coursing through my veins, it grows restless.
Okay, so we have ourselves another colorless infantry dragon. Now on paper, again, this looks like it's pretty good because colorless has no weaknesses, like no triangle advantages or disadvantages, which ends up being more positive than negative in most cases. And infantry generally doesn't have too many problems. However, dragon, so that's kind of bad. And hitting res, generally not preferable either because of units that deny adaptive damage and generally have high res stats in general. Most nukers have a decent res stat, and prominent meta units like Air use Mystic Boost and completely shut down these type of units. And on top of that, you got your dragon slaying problems, so you run into some Deirdres, Falchions, whatever, Nagas and all that, and you're gonna start being upset that you're using a dragon. But let's look at her first and see if she can overcome those sort of problems. So we got Dragon Fang, attack speed solo. Attack speed solo is definitely cool here. 4 skills, so definitely getting demoted. Nope. Anyways, let's talk about Sudden Panic real quick. A lot of people look at this and say that Aversa has officially been removed from the game because now you can use Sudden Panic. Yeah, no. The thing is, Sudden Panic is on a B skill, so it competes with very commonly used B skills. And I mean commonly and useful B skills. I mean like Chills, maybe Sabotage in the future, or Link skills. All very, very useful B skills to have. And Sudden Panic competing and taking away those potential slots is a problem. Not to mention, Aversa herself already has the Ner weapon and then can use a B skill additionally on top of that. Plus, Aversa's weapon also has -3 debuffs. So Aversa is still more useful than just having a unit with B having Sudden Panic. However, there are units that have high HP and support already for a slightly different role that could make use of this. For example, Loki, I think, would probably be the best user of Sudden Panic because then you can make her into like a mini Aversa and also have some control over the mobility of the enemy team. So if you're going to consider somebody using Sudden Panic, I highly recommend Loki. However, Loki doesn't necessarily make Aversa obsolete because, as I mentioned, you give up like the B skill that Aversa could use. You don't have the option also like flyers, so word flyers and tactic skills options that way. And on top of that, you can't use like reposition or smite or aerobatics or guidance. Like, so there's a lot of kind of issues with that. You do get healing, I guess, through Loki, but the positional skills tend to be more useful than healing from what I've seen, especially if you consider like Herons who can do healing, or healing tower even as a substitute. So sudden panic, I think it's useful, but not necessarily a necessity by any means. Now, remember, when you look at these new skills, you got to look at them critically, right? Like, useful, must pull, no. I mean, air offense, defense skills. Remember those? Remember disarm trap? They look fancy on first impression, but they're not that useful. You will survive without it. Anyways, back to Corrin. So, Savage Breath. This weapon is honestly the reason she sucks. It's really anti-synergistic with what you want to accomplish with this type of unit. So she, to sum it up, basically the less friends you have, the more stats you gain, which is bad because generally having units that support her will give you more stats than just the weapon itself. So you get 6 if you have no friends, you get 4 if you have 1 friend within 2 spaces, and then it just goes downwards from there. So if you consider like Corrins and Cadence, for instance, they're just going to give you more stats than what this weapon provides. So in that case, it's like, why you even have this weapon at all? And in that case, she's like, I'm just looking at a comparable option like Adrift Corrins, who also have like the opposite effect of this. They get cooldown reduction on their weapons, plus they get extra stats. So when you look at something like that, even the color difference ends up being probably pretty useful for someone like Adrift Male Corrin, who ends up having special acceleration, more constant healing, extra stats and such. That's just gonna be way better than taking away potential stats you could take just by using units that otherwise would support your tank. So not a fan of this weapon, and as a result, I think Corrin's probably the biggest loser on this banner, along with Berkut. But the thing is, Berkut has some potential. I don't see this unit being good, like, at all, because that breath just holds her back. If she has some really good stat spreads though, you could just swap out the breath, I guess, and just use her as a lightning breath unit with bonus doubler, and just basically be like a colorless Noe or Fae or something in that case, or colorless Adrift unit with Adrift. A colorless Adrift dragon or something. Maybe, but I do think the Adrifts have a better breath than that.
I'll hurt you.
I will burn everything with all my strength.
If you guys are wondering what I think of like Corrin and Tiki ults, I don't care. I don't. They don't bother me at all. They're popular characters. They will always be popular. And the vocal minority probably complains a little bit too much about these characters being released. These units are not even like excuses to make ults. They're actually canon. They've been in the story of Fire Emblem games, so I just think it's cool to see them in this way. It's also one I wouldn't expect. I wouldn't expect to see like evil Tiki. That's just my opinion, of course. Anyways, colorless armored dragon. Oh boy. So we have another colorless armored dragon. His name begins with D and ends with A. And he's not that great. But the same problems that he has, she has. And that's going to be armor, dragon, mobility problems. Not that useful. There's also another colorless armored unit that came out recently that was actually pretty good. I had pretty much the 2 easiest weeks I've ever had in AR by using the Lion King. So she already has a little bit of issues to overcome. However, all right. So you can't really see it because of the YouTube bar right now, but I'm going to just talk about Someone to Your Dream real quickly before I jump into the other things. And that's really what's going to make her different from the other armored dragons right now. So she pretty much, as long as she's beside another dragon or by herself, gets 4 to all stats and armor march for herself for free. So an armor unit that can be at any HP health, it doesn't require another armor nearby to get 2 mobility, is actually really good. So it takes away her mobility problem completely. You pretty much have a 2 movement armor BST unit all the time, as long as you don't mix it with like non-dragons or something, but it's pretty easy. In AR, you should be having your support units within 2 spaces anyways, so I don't think that's really too big of a problem. But yeah, that's actually really good. So armor mobility, not a problem. Takes away one of the biggest issues I have with using armors, and it is a prominent issue, especially when collecting ether or trying to run away after a first turn from tanking. But that visible stat thing isn't actually too good when you consider panic manners, panic weapons, which definitely could become more common. And generally, it's just not that much stats as using tactic skills, link skills, and even like hone attack 4 and whatnot, plus prayer wheel. So that could be undesirable stats and something you may not actually want. So that kind of takes away from the usefulness. But however, the mobility problem is overcome. Now, because she has a distant counter weapon, unlike Friendly Neighborhood Dormer, that actually means you can use Fallen Shield in the A slot safely and take away one of her other weaknesses, which is the armor weakness, which leaves her with only a dragon weakness, and that's it. Dragon, colorless unit, which is pretty good, always having 2 mobility. Not bad at all. You pretty much have like a F Grima with probably more stats. Therefore, for all the armored dragons that have come out recently, this is one done right. This one could be useful. Definitely useful. However, she's not a legendary hero, she's not a mythic hero, so she doesn't impact your score in any way. But if you do end up merging her through the result of maybe adding merges to another legendary hero on a banner down the road or mythic hero or something, this can be a really good one to merge up. However, all that aside, hitting res is still undesirable. Stuff like Mystic Boost will counter her. Nagas, you can't really overcome that problem, falchions and whatnot. But I think out of all the armored dragons, this one is good for now. Like literally to TLDR all this, out of this banner, I think the units that safely win consistency here would be the new Tiki for sure. I think she's like the best unit on the banner, which is kind of rare for me to say because honestly I've never been really a fan of armored dragons, but definitely because of her C skill, distant counter weapon, and Fallen Shield taking away most of her problems, it's like a dragon done right. And I think Mareeta is probably a number 2 as a one-off because like I said, her weapon is beneficial to Gale Force units. So those 2 are safely good units from this banner. And then Corrin is definitely like a big loser. Berkut is a big loser, but he could be one of the best units on the banner depending on how units get released or skills in the future also happen to synergize with his potentially really good weapon. So yeah, that pretty much summarizes how I think about this banner. And it's not anything that's like, oh my god, I need this sort of stuff. This isn't like Canagus, who's just straight up consistently a good unit for an armor. It's just an interesting banner. Also mentioned in the notification board, we're getting a free Delthea. So obviously we'll cover that in the unit comparison analysis, which I will upload tomorrow or the day after, depending on when we get it. But yeah. This also means, once we cover the math, that this banner is good to use your free summon tickets on colorless. Unit sharing is good. Pick up some good fodder there, potentially some good units as well. And that pretty much covers it, I'd say, on what I think of this banner. I think it's definitely an interesting one. But, you know, as it comes with orb value, and those of you that save orbs frequently or play free to play, you definitely should just wait until these come later down the road with less units on the banner or on a legendary mythic banner where you just get more value as you pick up these units. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Thanks for watching, guys. Give the video a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Sub to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next video, which will likely be my analysis in more detail of all the units and their comparisons to others in the game. Thank you for watching.